I woke up in the middle of the night and got up for the bathroom, and I didn't have a clue where I was, at least for a moment. I had taken a few steps before pausing, and I could feel the hard industrial carpet under my feet as I tried to get my bearings in the dark. And then suddenly a figure lurched up from another bed, a bed I realized then that I was standing right beside. And it was a young woman, and she hissed in a voice I'll never forget, "You come near me, and I swear I will cut off your..." I was 24 years old. I had been hitchhiking around New Zealand for several weeks, and I had stopped in this great little town, one of the best I've ever been in, on the northwest end of the South Island. I'd found a little hostel, not much more than a kitchen and a big room with 12 cots shoved against the wall for travelers to throw out their sleeping bags. After having dinner out, I had come back and joined a group of travelers and locals, talking in the kitchen, and someone had brought out a guitar and someone else had brought out some beer, and pretty soon there were 8 or 10 of us all sitting around singing and laughing and talking. And one of those people was this young woman, a woman with a knife who had a reason to fear men in the dark. At the time, I didn't quite know how to process this. I certainly made it clear to her that I had no intention of coming anywhere near her. But what I mean is that at that age, and with my naive experience, I didn't know quite how to think about her. I could only dimly make out the kind of experiences that someone must have had to make them sleep so lightly and to wake so vehemently to protect herself. Today's gospel story from John describes Jesus passionately protecting his Father's house. It is one of the few stories that is in all 4 gospels. And it is so important to John that he puts it at the very beginning of his gospel, just after Jesus' first miracle of turning water into wine. And as John tells it, the vignette moves from the large, giant temple construct down into smaller and smaller bits. First, it's the temple at large and its courts and walls, what the Greeks call the hieron. In the temple, he found people selling. Then it is his Father's house, the oikos. Stop making my Father's house a house of merchandise. Then it is the inner sanctuary of the temple, the place that only the priest could go, the holiest of holies, where Jesus says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." He's using the word for that smallest, most intimate part of the temple, the naos. And then finally, it's Jesus' own body. But he was speaking of the temple of his body. We see this successive shrinking to the smallest, most unique and intimate part, Jesus' own body. And in this, John is not making only a theological statement, aligning the being of Jesus Christ with the Jewish holiest of holies, but he is also giving us an emotional explanation for Jesus' anger. An explanation that does not only help us understand Jesus of Nazareth in the 21st century, in the first century, but which has everything to do with whether our human race will survive in the 21st. Anger is often a sign of violation. When someone is angry, they've often experienced their dignity, their basic human dignity, undercut or discounted in some kind of way. Not everyone who experiences that kind of violation is angry at first, especially those who have been violated in their bodies. They may be afraid, sad, despairing. They may be numb, and they may be that way for years. But if they can grow to the point of recognizing and claiming their dignity, then they will almost always experience and respond to that violation with anger. We are seeing this kind of anger expressed by the thousands of women who have been sexually violated and come to name it as part of the Me Too movement. We are seeing this kind of anger expressed by thousands who protest and riot in the streets of Baltimore and Ferguson and Minneapolis in the wake of police killings of unarmed men. We are seeing it in the protests by Parkland teens and other teens in the wake of school shootings. And we have seen it in the rural poor who voted overwhelmingly for a president who promised them that their dignity would be restored. Was this last group justified in this? Well, that's a question that our country will likely be answering for a long time still to come. Sometimes people who are in power become angry when their power is not respected. And at the root of this is the belief that our dignity comes from the power we wield instead of being something that we are born with. It's what the world tells us, that how much we can control and command our situation is how dignified we are. This kind of anger of thwarted power is misguided. People who know that real power comes only from trust, which is built on relationships, service, and love, these people are not angered if their power is disrespected. They know that that power only comes from the world that can be taken away, or else it comes from internally, in which case it cannot be taken away. But people violated in their bodies, whose dignity is violated in their bodies, they often become angry. And the story of Jesus in John today suggests that they should become angry, that anger is a normal, healthy human emotion in the face of violation, especially when that violation is through the body. Jesus, because he is so filled with the passion for God's way, feels the desecration of the temple in his own self, in his body. Later, his followers remember the line from Psalm 69, "Zeal for your house has consumed me." Maybe Jesus quoted that. The rest of that verse goes on to say, "The scorn of those who scorn you, God, has fallen on me." Jesus will receive the scorn of the powerful on his own body in a most horrid and excruciating way. Ahead of that torture, he will guide that anger to expose and judge the corrupt, bankrupt scapegoating by the leadership of his day. Have you experienced violation? Have you experienced violation in your body? God knows you. God loves you. Jesus suffered violation, and God healed that suffering. Jesus was angry, and he used his anger in ways that served and defended and protected those who were violated in their bodies. Are you seeking Christ? Then you are called to witness to, stand with, and heal those who suffer bodily violence. Perhaps you are like I was at 24, fumbling in the dark, just minding your own business. It's time to wake up. It's time for us to wake up. Begin where you are and tread gently and ever so respectfully as you listen in order to learn. Jesus identified with the violated by subjecting his own body to the powers of this world. And he called that body God's temple.